So, we are back after the break, and as Shakal said that this force situation was one that he would be shoving, and I think that we can pretty easily utilize Hold'em Resources calculator here. So we can look about a bit of the borders that how much our opponent needs to be. And actually with 9.4 BBs, I think that we can look this through as a basic hand pretty much. Because I don't think that we are having that much fold equity. Or I don't think that we have next to no fold equity in $1.5 game. So we shouldn't have that much difference between... Actually the English's range here, it would protect him a bit more against AdSense Boy. So we'll go through with the advanced. So we are having this as an advanced hand. 3-bet calculation. And let's put the opponents that we don't mind folding, so it's a bit quicker to calculate. And I must say that I must thank Neo, because this has been an excellent video to go through, because there have been so many situations. At the first I thought that this will be a quick video to go through, because there were so few situations and they were far in between. But now we are practically, we didn't have time to just skip through. So like the Nash ranges in here would be the AdSense Boy to be opening 25.7%. And then Force would be at the bottom end of the calling range. And I think that it's mainly on what the AdSense Boy will be folding. And here he would be folding 1/2 of his range. And I think that in real life the opponent is going to be opening a bit tighter here. I think this opponent did open pretty tightly, and that will be a problem in here, because if we are comparing how the range changes when we are moving from about 25% to 20%, we can see that there are some hands that we dominate that are not present in the 20% range that would be. So it should be worse for Force. And when we are looking at the best response for Neo, then Force will be... It doesn't require a lot of change in AdSense Boy's ranges, but it will have a huge effect on how profitable the small pocket pairs are to shove. So this is a really nasty situation in a way that if the opponent is wide enough, it's profitable, but it's not profitable by much. And if the opponent is too tight, it suddenly becomes a really bad situation. But I think against Shakal it would be... I think for Shakal that was an excellent hand to take, and that was on the limit that do I want to speak about the hand, so that was a really good catch. And in this kind of situation, if we don't need to move a lot. That if we are moving this guy to button or small blind as a raiser, the Force will be a really good shove against this kind of guy. So that was a good point. And we'll carry on with the video.
And here I also think I can't call. Here against this UTG raiser, I think the best thing is just call and re-evaluate.
In the bottom right, what would you have done if this Verna guy would have the same stack size as this Kuko? So about 18 big blinds.
I don't get it again.
If this guy that opens is having about 19 big blinds, you chose to call here. Would your choice be different if this opponent on the big blind would have a shorter stack?
I don't think so. Why should it be different?
I think in here it's because you pretty much can't be shoving here, or it's not as profitable to shove here when Verna is having such a deep stack and he's a loser player.
Ah, okay, because of the bubble pressure, okay.
Because of the bubble pressure, and it's also that you can induce or you can apply a lot of pressure in here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So actually, this is also one of those spots that it's close.
So I'm out of position. We didn't hit much, so I think I can check fold this hand. And here I can't do anything.
And I agree with your reasoning that check folding is probably optimal with ace queen when you have called it. Called it preflop and you hit exactly nothing, and there's two players in the hand and one player with almost a random range that will hit even a low board flop.
Mm-hmm. So you check back, but still I think at least one of them has something that beats me, so I will stay passively here. Maybe we get even one more free card, but we don't improve, so I will stay passively.
And you will have some option of winning that hand post flop, or
yeah,
when you are going to showdown. It's
here I think with ace-9 I have to call anything, and here if we get the chance I think I will shove this. I mean, he looks tight, but he could start playing back at me. And here I think he looks pretty tight, the rest looks pretty big, but I think I have to hack off.
I think this is also one of those situations. I noticed that this is a 10, king 10 off. That's okay to fold.
He looks pretty tight, the rest looks pretty big, but I think I have to go for it here.
And with the ace-9, I think that even if you are having when you are just having 3 big blinds, it's pretty hard to fold a lot of hands here. I think at least with the top 50% of hands, you pretty much just need to go. Even when opponent looks strong, because you don't require that much equity in the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So...
okay.
That's an insane spot on the top right.
Here I think I have to shove. And 7-8 suited from mid position is I think a bit too weak.
This is actually a situation we should look with hold'em resources, because I think with 7-8 suited that would be a shove. It's not a huge shove, but I think it should be a shove.
Yeah, it could be.
Let's look it super quickly. It might be that I'm more used to having antes, so it goes a bit slowly. And when I said that let's look it super quick and then hold'em resources is super slow with the hands, so... And Deja asked that can I raise Neo's voice a bit more. I can't raise Neo's voice, but I can lower my own. So... And we can discuss about this other hand on the top right.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really weird situation, because there are two players with decent sized stacks. This Martin Gucci has been opening a lot, so I think that it's a good shove, and this Crazy G should never have anything really good by just calling here, or really rarely should have anything really good. So I think a shove here with ace-jack suited is going to be okay. Also with ace-queen off, I'm a bit unsure. Actually, ace-jack off is probably a good shove as well, and ace-10 suited. And something like 6s plus. But this is a spot that you can't be super wide because you are also getting called by one, or at the worst part you can be called by both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll adjust my voice a bit lower so you can raise it on the other end. It's a bit of a horrible situation because we are already at VLC, we are at maximum volume. At our broadcasting software, we are already at maximum volume on Neo's side, so it's a hard spot. So let's see how this hand is going. And this is one of those spots that when we are having 8 players, I think, or actually it's only 6 players, then the equity model calculation can take a long time. And when my computer has been slowing down, so like right now I quit doing the webcam stream, so my computer needs to decode just one stream but encode 2 streams to be serving one stream to Neo and then one stream for the rest of you. So and actually, if you are having questions, now would be a good time to take a quick question.
Yeah. Which one? Let's see. One question I'm asking myself is: should I start floating people, and what I should do if other people float me?
As a float, you are meaning that your opponents are calling you with pretty much air on the flop, and then they are betting on the turn if you are not betting.
Mm-hmm. And I also noticed that sometimes there are people who often call against me and then do this float stuff even in the same tournament 2 or 3 times in a row.
It depends. That you'll need to see on your opponents that are they really floating or are they just hitting well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you might yourself, if you have really aggressive opponents, you should have a float in your arsenal to make it less profitable for them to be betting you a lot. And also when the opponents, if they are betting aggressively but they are folding to aggression, then you are having chips coming your way by floating. But in general, I think like the regs that we have seen in these games, they have been so tight that if their opponent is tight and not too aggressive, then it's going to be not that good to be floating. But that's a good general question, that there are spots that you need to be floating or you should be floating. And I think that they are a good, it would be good to have either the spots that you have noticed your opponents floating you on the hand analysis forums, or the other way around, that you are thinking that if it's a good option or not. So, and actually the 8-7 suited, it's really close. Like the Nash, he's here, and I think that we are having pretty solid ranges on our opponents, that there is not a lot that I would change. Like I think that that's pretty general, that what I think that we would be called if we shove here. And 8-7 suited it's borderline.
Okay. Maybe 10-9 I would have shoved.
And 9-8 would also be a good shove, but...
Folded. And here pocket 8s. I think that will go all in, even if he would have shoved.
That's good that you have...
Ace 9 here, I can't do much. And 8-5 off. Can't do much either.
And that's really good that you would have been going all in, even if this crazy G is going all in before you, because 8s are just such a solid hand. And Radeka, I'm not playing VCoop today. You can see that I'm holding a coaching session here. I don't think that I'm playing V-Coup either, because I think I don't like playing the mega fields that much. I might be playing some part of it if there is a good day of other tournaments to just have some fun, but I'm thinking that probably I'm not going to play too much of V-Coup.
Here pocket 8s don't hold up. Pretty unlucky.
And yeah, that was pretty unlucky, but you can't do nothing more about it because you got it in really well. And
with 9-5 off, I can't do much here. And if he limps here, I think my hand is too bad to do anything. And here I can also just fold. We kind of have a gut shot here, but I will just play this passive. Hijack with 13. I can't shove. I don't think it makes sense to main raise this. So I will just fold.
I think that's closer than you think the queen jack off, but I agree with you. A queen jack suited would have been a decent shove, but nothing much you can do there. So
this action, I mean, it's a small bet, but I don't think it makes sense with a gut shot at an overcard.
I'm waiting for.
I have 7 outs.
We lost in here. You had 6 big blinds and king 9 off, so. And simulation depth, let's reduce the simulation depth for the next hands. And king 9 off from the cutoff. There are actually 2 hands. And we can see from the quick analyze that this is quite likely that actually this shows that it's better to fold it. Let's see. I thought that king 9 would be connected enough for it to be a good shove, but it's on the edge, it's on the edge. That was a good fold, I think. Actually, let's check the opponent's calling ranges. And actually,
because of my position in the tournament, it would be good to take a slight negative edge on that spot, I thought.
Yeah, because you are going to be the last and you are not going to get money by folding, but I don't think that if the opponent's ranges seem to be quite okay from HRC, but I don't think that you should take 2 negative edges here. So, and this is also that your position in the tournament, it's not only that you are last in chips, but you are having two of the biggest stacks next to you, so it makes your stealing a bit harder. Because when your stack goes even lower than that, you are not having as much fold equity against them than you would usually have. And ICM, it doesn't take what kind of spot do you have on the table, it doesn't take it into account.
Yes, it would be stupid, I think I would shove it, but offsuit I can't shove it. If this would be suited, I think I would shove it, but offsuit I can't shove it.
I think even king 6 suited probably wouldn't be a shove there. So I disagree with your...
This is UTG razor here. Not too much. Same here. I'm thinking about maybe stealing here if I get the chance. But I think he's a bit too call happy. And my hand is total trash, so I will wait for a better chance.
In those kind of situations, your opponent, if he doesn't call you at least 50% of his hands, you are automatically making profit by just min raising that on the top right. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's a situation that you can, even against unknowns, I think unknowns in general, they are going to be folding more than one half of their hands. Especially when antes come, they're a good source of chips. So, and that's something that you can't shove a 7-3 off there, because opponent doesn't need to be calling much for it to be unprofitable. But you can raise small and fold there, I think, with a pretty wide range. But it's total trash, so
yeah,
it's...
I mean, the problem is a bit if they 3-bet me, or, I mean, they could be more likely to 3-bet me because the blinds are higher, and I also think that if I lose this, I lose a lot of my stack because I have just around 12 here, so I don't know.
But this is one of those situations that I think that's on the edge if it's a good fold or not. I think it's a good fold, but there should be, I think that you profitably can open about 80 to 85% of hands there and open some of the hands and shove some of the hands.
I think this here is just a bit too much of my stack.
And that's actually, we had a short discussion on with Neo that how can you make any edges on hypers when the players in general are so short. These are, like, some of the edges are created when you are 10 to 12 big blinds deep and you are doing something else than shoving that opponents might play well against. But opponents probably haven't thought about their ranges completely on what if you limp, what if you raise. So that's also something that you can make edges even on a lower stack sizes. And to carry on that, if the Lewis would be a good reg that would be calling enough, then raising 7-3 off is going to be, it's going to be madness.
Yeah, I can also just fold. Well, technically the bubble pressure here should allow me to be pretty aggressive here. But these guys are so call happy, I think I will just fold this.
And this is one of the hands on the bottom right that I think the King 10 suited is way easier to play than Ace 3 off. So that would be something to think. And it's like, even if some of the opponents are call happy against Crack City, it doesn't matter that if you are min raising here, you are pretty much going with it every time. But the Verna he's the problem there because he's having such a big stack, and a big stacked loose player in position is something that you don't want to have there.
And here, if he shoves for 12, I think he has something like a pocket pair that he doesn't want to play post flop, and I don't think I can call with king at off.
I think on the top right this deuces would be a shove. It's easy that we are having just the 230 hands, so we are most likely having just enough. And actually deuces is not a shove here. Let's see our opponent's ranges. They are even tighter than I would expect, so that's actually a good fold.
to off, I couldn't have shoved anyway.
I think with king deuce
Really
off,
hoping for a good hand here.
you could have shoved it.
Minus few chips.
And actually, let's go through that as well.
But it would be minus EV, right?
I think that if you would have if the opponent would not have opened it, then you could have shoved it. I think.
But it would be minus EV, I think. What do you think?
Let's see.
Okay.
I think king deuce with that's actually again a bit surprising. I'm a bit too used to antes, it seems, and big antes, because even king deuce suited would not be plus EV here against general ranges. It might be that the Iron Mind is going to have a bit too wide of a calling range here than what he would, or what a general player in these games would have, but I'm still it will make king deuce suited if I'm changing the big blind's range. That big blind, when he needs to call 36%, I don't think that most opponents will call the, or that's the likely way that they are making mistakes, but still king deuce isn't going to be a shove, so that's a good thought there. And that's all about if you are unsure about something.
And here with ace check off, I think this is another.
Like, if you are unsure of something, you should be marking the hand and checking it later on, or posting it to the hand analysis forums. That's going to be how you are improving in the games. And that's why we are going through, because if it takes, let's say it takes 30 seconds of our time to go through a hand quickly, it doesn't matter that much, but if we find something that's valuable for Neo, it's worth using the time there.
The spot where I just have to shove over them, the 600 in the pot.
Excellent shove with the ace jack. That would actually be a spot that you can shove a lot of aces there. And practically every pocket pair. And on the bottom table there will be an interesting situation brewing.
And he goes all in, he just calls him, so I think this is a good spot to shove over him and hope that he...
And that's a great spot to shove, and even though the Iron Mind might be calling this, but if he calls this, just calls with aces or kings, then you need to make a note here.
Calls. I thought his range is not that strong. Sadly, this guy here won this. And here with king 5 suited, we can't do much. With 4-5 off, if it would be suited, I think I would have shoved it, but offsuit, I can't shove this for 8.
And actually this is one spot, then there will be actually probably two spots that we are going to be discussing. But first the 4-5 off. I think that doesn't require a lot for your opponent for this to be a really plus EV shove. Like, it's not if you're just looking at Nash ranges, but your opponent needs to call 25%. Actually, that's something that I thought that the opponent needs to call more. Actually, I'm moving it back, or moving the goalpost, that if opponent needs to only call 26% for it not to be plus EV for you to shove, 5-4 off. I thought first that the opponent needs to call something like 40%. That would be the Nash here. But because of the ICM situation, this is probably, or this is a good fold. So, again, well played.
This is a good question here, because I was going to ask you what those small blind spots are where I should shove looser than Nash. I mean, how do I know when I should shove looser than Nash?
I think in general in these low-level turbos, I think in general people are playing with more static ranges than they should. So you should be... I think in situations that opponent needs to call something like 50% or 60% or 40% or 35%. 35% would be probably on the edge. But if opponent needs to call more than 35%, it's pretty likely that opponents aren't calling that much. So in situations that ICM pressure isn't that great, your opponent needs to call a lot. So those are going to be the situations that you are making money by shoving wider than Nash. And there might also be some situations, if you are having a reg on a big blind, let's say that you are 3-handed or 4-handed. If you are having a reg on a big blind, that if you are shoving there, you are getting markedly bigger stack than him, and you can then put more pressure on him. It might make sense to take a bit of a minus EV shove there to have a larger stack and to have more plus EV spots when the game develops. But in general, that's what I'd say that would be good.
Okay. I just contrast this.
In this situation with the King 7, I think that even though this quite likely is a minus EV shove, that's something that I would take, and I would probably min raise and then I would shove any flop or call any re-raise. But I think that I'm getting a bit more folds if I'm min raising this than if I'm shoving it. And I think that even though it's a minus EV shove, because of the blinds are going over, if the blinds go over you, you are having just 2 big blinds left. You are not having any fold equity. So this is a desperation shove, or how do you say it, that you are going to be desperate if you are not taking a spot soon. And this is a situation that you really should utilize future game simulation. And a simulation depth of 2 would be okay in here, because then it will also look at your small blind and big blind hands that are coming up. So in here, the plus EV hands would be about 33%, but I think that I'll still take the King 7 off, because of the fact that our stack, I think ICM does overvalue our stack slightly in here, even with future game simulation. And I would be apt to take some minus EV spot here to have better spots later on.
Okay.
And I must say that it's really nice to see you both Shakal and Radeka online, because you are both new names for me, and it's also always nice to see new names in the stream and in the chat.
I exactly have to forward.
It will be interesting on the bottom right what the opponents are having.
And as for here, I think I have to call and or shove it. Where is he? Yeah, I think I have to shove here.
This is also an interesting situation, and this is I think this is one of those spots that it's all about fold equity. And this is a situation that I think that if you are checking here and you are shoving pretty much any flop or any flop that you are not hitting well, you are generating more fold equity against the English than if you are just calling. And when you are having more fold equity, it's going to be better for you, the more English folds.
Okay.
But that's a bit more advanced, and that's something that I think that you can, because it will be for opponent if he's having something like queen high or king high, it would be hard for him to call a half a pot bet on the flop. But it will be easy for him to, now that the pot is 1100 and it doesn't take a lot of his stack, and he can just call you here with something like 10-8 or something like that, and that's going to be actually okay for him.
On my last few trips. Sadly, he's stronger than I thought. And we are out of this.
And even though the limp this time was stronger than you thought, when the guy is playing 31/10, there's going to be a lot of limps that are not that profitable. So now you just crashed into the top range or his top range, so that's a bit problematic. And Radeka, good that you have liked the videos on YouTube, and it really means a lot that when these videos are on YouTube that you are pressing them likes and you are subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot. It really means a lot, and the more likes and subscribers we are having, the more material we can create for YouTube. So, and also on Twitch, that if you are subscribing, it helps us get the material out. So, but let's carry on.
Cut off for 10. I think I could have shoved something like Jack 10 suited here.
I think you can shove there something like Jack 9 suited
Maybe
or
Jack 9 suited.
yeah. But I agree that 7-5 is not good enough.
King 10 off. I also can't shove, and I don't think it makes sense to win raise. But maybe it would make sense to win raise a few hands here, but I think I would just get called or play back it.
And that's also that you need to know the situation in the table. Like if you would have 10 big blinds but you would be the shortest stack on the table, it will make sense for you to even shove the king 10 off. But when there are the two largest stacks are on the blinds that are most likely to call, and there are two smaller stacks on the table, it makes absolutely no sense in shoving the king 10 off. And you are requiring a lot better hand to shove in that situation. So I think that's a well-read situation.
Here we are now on the bubble. And we can't call his shove here. And we also can't call his shove.
It's actually interesting to see what kind of range the opponent would need to have that. Because I think the range might surprise you. It's the king 6 off. No? Does this king 6 off?
Yeah.
Because I think that these situations are some that when we are plotting range versus hand equities, let's go for something like king 6, king 8, king 10. Let's do the same hand suited as well. Like what the opponent needs to be shoving here And the king 6 off requires about 40% range for the opponent. I don't think that it will be, but something like, and king 8 off is also. But you can see that even king 6 suited is going to be around. Like the king 10 suited is going to be easy. But I think that even these hands, the king 6 suited, king 8 suited, and king 10 off would be calls here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something that I see people make a lot of mistakes. Mistakes in the games that when you don't need to have that great of a... When there's only 800 chips to call, or was it 800 or 600 chips to call? For actually it was 800 chips to call and the pot is already 1300. You don't need to have more than something like 40-41% equity against the opponent's range.
Okay. Yeah, with pocket nines, if he shoves again, I think I have to call him. I think I will go for that. I'm just a bit worried about him here. I hope this is not a trap.
It's also that I think that if your opponent is like this Iron Mind that's playing, the VPIP and PFRs are really close together. When those guys are limping, I'm thinking that they are having more traps than a guy that limps a lot of their hands. Because the more hands they are limping, the more likely that they are playing pretty honestly with their limps.
Mm-hmm.
And actually to add for the previous discussion that sit and goes are, or tournament poker in general in the final tables, it's going to be all about reading the situation and utilizing the situation to your best. And I like what I have seen here. I think you have made good decisions on most spots and you have also had a pretty good thoughts on
both pocket nines. I mean, we are now close in chips together. I think I can shove about 80% maybe. I'm not sure if it's in any two spot. And because they are pretty loose, I would just fold this. 5-6 off.
For the previous hand.
Yes, it was a bit stupid. I forgot the stack sizes.
Yeah, when you are having like 20 big blind stacks, this is not going to be an any two spot by any means. And this is also something that, even though the situation is that you can add a lot of pressure, but it seems like your opponents don't know pretty much anything on sit and go poker. And when they don't know about anything, they don't feel the pressure they should feel.
Mm-hmm.
And like this being an any two spot, it requires the opponents to be really tight. And if the opponents aren't really tight, you are going to have some horrible situations in these times. But
Yeah.
it's good that you notice the stack sizes yourself.
Yeah, and win race also doesn't make much sense, I think, right? Because they just call too much.
And they just call too much, and that's also, if there would be a regular like this Iron Mind or something like that, it would also be a really hard spot for you because they can add a lot of pressure on you if you are min raising.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends. There are regs that I'm min raising a ton against because they next to never play back at me, even though they have the situation or the spot. So it depends a lot on.
Yeah, I noticed sometimes that post-flop I have a easy time against many people. They call me on the bubble and then they basically always fold to my bet, even on very coordinated boards.
And there are people that are calling a lot pre-flop, but they are folding a lot post-flop. And against those kind of people, you can print money by raising a lot and then betting a lot of flops. If they are just playing their own hands and they are hitting only 1 in 3 of the flops, you'll notice that you are pretty quickly making money.
Mm-hmm. And because they are pretty loose, I would just fold this. 5-6 off. I don't think I can shove this. I'm thinking here if I shove this, but I think I am too deep. So I will just min-raise this. And if he would have shoved, maybe this would have been a call. I'm not sure what his, how aggressive he is rebet-wise.
Yeah, I think that your analysis is spot on there with the ace jack.
This raise here, which is pretty big, I'm just fold. If it would have been folded to me, I think I would have just folded because he doesn't surrender his lines here. But if he shoves, I can get out of the way. Well, I'm not sure if I should min-raise here. They are really call happy. I will just fold.
I think those kind of situations are situations that you can make money by min-raising, that you are deep enough that you are not investing a lot of your chips. And you don't know how your opponents will react if you are never putting pressure onto them.
Yeah, I should have tried it at least once to see what happens.
Yeah, and that's one of the better hands because it's going to have you are going to have some equity with it anytime, so. But we'll see if there are spots on the button later on.
They seem to be very aggressive, so I think it makes sense for me to be a bit tighter here. I know that we have a bigger stake here. I have to tighten up anyway. Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe shoving, but I'm not sure if he's in active enough stealer for that. I think I would have just folded anyway.
And when we previously talked that you are looking at the wrong statistics when you are looking at PFR, now you looked at raise first in, and that's the thing that you should do. So I think that you pretty much, you know that what stat you need to be looking at.
And do you agree with the fold here, or is this a closer one?
I agree with the fold here. I don't think that this is that close one.
And what should my range be for a rebet?
I think we can look this up with the Hold'em resource, but I'm guessing about ace-10 suited, ace-jack off on aces, okay, so something like king-queen.
Kind of, okay.
It's kind of a standard range, so it's a value range here, because I don't think that you are getting that many folds from your opponents.
Okay.
But we can look at it, so it's always going to be a advanced hand. Let's see next. And let's see it really quickly. If your opponent raises 26% and calls 17%, so fold to 3-bet would be about 67%. Then it would be plus EV to shove ace-9 off and ace-5 suited. I'm thinking that opponent isn't likely to be opening 26% here. So I'm thinking that opponent is going to be opening a lot tighter here. And I think this is going to be closer to what we should be shoving. And ace-8 isn't going to be in it. And this is actually, and this is good to note, that king queens and king jack suited is going to be better than something like ace-7 suited here. And the pocket pairs like fours would be I think it would be, actually fives would be the okay shove, and fours is, I wouldn't hate it, so that would be pretty much what I'm thinking.
Okay. Here we have a collision, which is great.
The collision is...
The right person won, so we're in the money.
The collision is even greater for...
Because they are so aggressive and call happy.
The collision is even better for you, because usually when if the situation isn't that I'm winning money, I'm usually always wanting, if there are two players all in, I'm always wanting the worse player to win them, because it's more likely that I'm getting the chips from the worse player than the better player.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like you are getting money, and I think the worst player wins the chips, so it's like perfect for you.
I have to tighten my range, at least when we are deep stack now. I think I can shove pretty normal against him, but it's a bit more problematic here when we are deep stacked. I'm not really good at deep stack play here. King 3 off or 5.
And what I have seen from you today, I think for the deep stack play that in general you have made pretty good moves on average, but there needs to be more aggression, or I think that you are losing some chips that you could gain by choosing a more aggressive line.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's probably what we have been discussing here, that there have been points that your ranges can be, with deeper stacks, that your ranges can be wider in certain spots.
Really thinking about maybe shoving this, but I think it would be minus EV. I think something like King 6, King 7 off I could shove.
I agree with your range evaluation on top.
I mean, they are so aggressive. Maybe I could 3-bet this.
And on the bottom table, the more aggressive a player is, the better for you it would be to shove this, and especially when opponent opens so large that if they are folding something, it will be huge for you to win that kind of a pot.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know players that are folding 3x or 4x opens.
But what if he's one of those players who calls with nearly everything? Then I shove. Because his fold to 3-bet is... I mean, I don't have much hands on him, but it's 0.
You don't have much hands on him, and that's pretty much the point. If he's calling everything, then ace-7 is probably a bad move. Even actually, it's closer because there is not that much equity, or there's not that much ICM pressure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if we are thinking that our opponent isn't folding anything, then we can just look this up as a basic hand, and we can see that if our opponent, we can actually plot it with the range versus hand equities, and would it ever be good for you, that how much your opponent would need to open, and that's pretty sick ranges there. If the opponent is never folding, then it's not going to be a good shove, but I believe that opponent is going to be folding some of his hands here.
Okay. I don't know. I think it's better to fold and hope that they collide maybe, or get involved in the hand for a big pot. It would also help if I would get a good hand here now and then. Interesting that he limps here. I will just check. Since we don't hit anything, I can play this check fold. He checks to me. I don't think it makes sense here to bet. It just looks a bit weird. Now he hits a check, so I think now I can be more aggressive. Let's see what he does.
I think that you don't have that much. You have some showdown equity, but I think it makes some sense to bet there as well, because if the opponent checks to you, it's pretty often that he doesn't have a great hand, especially if a weaker player checks to you. But I think that that's not the point, but this is the thought process. So in that kind of situations, if it's like, I'm not going to be betting here because my opponent is limping, because my opponent's limping range hits that flop better than mine random range. When you just check it back to him, you're having a random range of cards there, and you might hit practically anything that comes on the board in your opponent's eyes. And when you are just checking, I think it's believable for you to hit something. And I think pre-flop even, you can, if your opponent is limping, you can start to charge him for limping, and especially with some hand as strong as Jack-King, then I'd actually even pre-flop, I'd bet, and then the flop would be a bit more interesting. But it's all about why, not what you do, but why you do. And I agree what you did, but I don't agree on the why. And on the turn, when the jack hits, it's okay. Okay to start betting there, because you are 10 betting for value.
So he really didn't have anything. He really seems to be opening every hand here. And again, not sure how I should adjust here. I don't think I can shove over with King 8 off, so I think I can fold this at least. And here for 5 BB. I think he's too tight to do anything here. And here with King 9, I think I can't do much anyway. So I will fold this, here King 2 suited.
I think with King 9, you should be opening here. I think that there is just value waiting to be had. It's going to be a great hand when you are 3-handed.
Okay. I can shove. Should be a correct pair shove. And I just noticed that we are also in the bubble, so good that I didn't call here. But yeah, I can't do much with 3-8. And if this guy here just limps and this guy here calls, I think there's enough money in the pot to just shove over them. And here pocket 9s is also a shove.
I think they were... I might be a bit too error-centered in my coaching, but I'd say that those both two analyses and thoughts were spot on. That there's enough money in the pot, which makes Ace-Queen a really good hand to shove here. And also with the pair of 9s, shove is going to be a great option.
I think this should be a correct pair shove, even if he passed out now. And here, they folded to my shove.
In the top, I think even deuces would be a good shove when we are thinking about the next hands that are going to roll over us.
Okay. Well, now I'm really thinking if the small blind here shoves into me, if I should call this. But he folds, and I will also make a mental note now that he seems to be pretty tight from small blind, and that's not a good idea here to call his shoves too late. and great that they fold, so I can shove ace-5 suited. I'm also
and on the bottom table, look, actually king 3 off is not a bad one, but I'm just thinking that what are you playing in there? If you are not opening practically anything from the button.
Let's see what he does here. Don't like me, he's thinking so long. Unless he taps out. But he calls me with ace-5, so we will probably split this, yeah. Here I just called. And then now that he overbets here, I mean, it could be a reaction to him losing a pot, and maybe against this super loose player I should go for it, but I think this is too dangerous, so I will just fold.
If you would have a 9 there, practically any 9, I would have been just going for it against this Kucho, and so, but with a 3, I agree that you can be folding there.
I mean, we hit a piece of the flop, but I'm not sure. Now, if he again limps, I mean, he could limp anything. There's 500 in the pot. I'm really thinking if I should shove over them here or not. Here, chip 10, I think, is a clear shove. Let's hope for the best, which is a fold. And here I'm not sure what to do. Should I shove over him or not? I think I will fold.
I was like hoping for, in my mind, I was like, Neo, don't fold. Like, whatever you do, that you can call that profitably when you are having players that are likely to lose. You can shove that profitably. Like,
Yeah.
I think all the buttons are plus EV, but...
Okay, so
but
that was it.
that's something that I think that, like the Queen Jack suited, it's a really robust hand, but the stack size is really weird, so I think that even calling this, so like completing this would be good.
Okay.
And at the top I'm also interested if he should have called a shove with Queen Jack off, especially at bubble situation. That's something that we can look through, because I think that it's going to be... I think it's going to be a call, but...
Really, I would have thought that this would be a fold, maybe if it would be suited.
Let's see.
Yeah, I think we were a bit too close together.
But it's like the Nash for Crazy G is going to be almost 90% here.
Oh.
And that's why, because Queen Jack off is going to play pretty well against a like completely random range. That if we are looking at something like Queen Jack off and we are looking at the completely random range, we are having the Queen Jack off is having great equity against a range that. So.
But the question is if he would really shove close to Nash, maybe he's a bit too tight.
But then there is a great button, this range versus hand equities in Hold'em resources, that we can look at how much our opponent needs to shove. That's going to be plus EV to be calling. And it's about 73-74%. So I think that in my games, if this would have been a reg, this would have been a pretty much no-brainer call. But even in $1.5 games, it's quite likely that the opponent is not shoving enough. So I think that, like, if everybody plays correctly, this is a call and it doesn't require that much thinking. But in this game, it might as well be that it's not a profitable call. So I'd say that it would be, especially what we have seen from this Crazy G, it's a good fold against him, and I think it's a good fold against most of the opponents here. And that's actually a good question again from Shakal. So, And that's something that I want to get out there, that if you are taking part in these coaching sessions, you are getting the most benefit if you are asking questions, if you are thinking about the hands, how the hands should be played, and not just passively following along. And because those are the things that when you are asking, then you can be learning. And that's really good that we have had good questions today. And in these games, when the ranges are quite far from what would be optimal in the situation, and like I said, from the calling ranges, if opponent needs to call a lot, then it would make more sense to call more than Nash. But it's also, or not, it makes more sense to shove more than Nash. But it also goes the other way around, that if there is a situation that opponent should shove like 80, let's say 60% or more, I think it's more likely that the opponent would not, the general opponents would not be shoving enough. So you need to be calling tighter than Nash on most situations that the opponent need to be opening really wide. And that's also because the opponents are not understanding the situations as well as they should.
Okay. And here I'm really hoping for a collision. Well, at least he lost a couple of chips, so I have now a slight lead on him. Here with queen 6 off, can't do much.
I don't like your attitude in the bottom table that you can't do much, because that's...
And he lip steps again.
Because that's going to be something that, if you are thinking that you can't do much, you have not had great hands, but you have had okay hands. So this is a really good game that you had on video, because I think this is a game that you practically you are giving the win to Kucho in this game by just playing really passively.
This time we hit a check, but there's an ace. And he again bets.
I must say that that's a really weird bet size for Kucho.
I agree.
And I would actually be going for broke here, because I don't think that opponent, when he also raises a lot, I don't think opponent would be limping an ace here and betting an ace that high. So I'm thinking that's mostly a bluff for a hand that's weaker than a jack. And there are a lot of gutshot potential that can be on in this hand.
Yeah. Also, all the time when I do this, they somehow have the ace.
It's also that your mind remembers the times that are remarkable somehow. Like, it's a standard situation in here that your opponent is not having the ace as often, but it's remarkable for you, and it can also be noteworthy, and you'll remember those situations that your opponent had exactly the hand that you were afraid of, rather than the situation that the opponent just folds, or opponent just shoves with something like jack high or queen high, or has a pair of tens here.
Okay. The problem here is that an ace is really likely, but on the other hand he is a really aggressive, really loose player. So I think I will shove this here. Hope for him to fold. And here I don't think I can do much with pocket fives, because he's so short, and he calls with 10-8.
And as I said just a few minutes ago, that you'll remember that the opponents are always having an ace here.
Yeah.
So I think that I agree with you that but like, I don't agree with you that ace is likely, because the opponent limps preflop and he has been raising a lot and also limping a lot. So I don't think that when an opponent has also a pretty wide rating range, that he would be limping an ace pre-flop that often. And if he limps an ace, I think that he would be betting smaller. So those are both of things that are making ace a lot less likely, in my opinion, than a jack or 10 or some kind of a gut shot. And we are lucky here that the opponent doesn't hit some kind of gut shot, because if he has some kind of gut shot, he's going to have a queen or a king, and both of those are pretty bad news on the turn.
And we are lucky that our hand holds up and that he didn't have an ace. Normally when I do this, I always show up with the nuts. So I'm pretty happy about that. And now we can get out of the way here. If he would have folded, I think I could shove here pretty loose, but I'm not sure if he really feels the bubble pressure. Here I can't do much with 9-2 off. And with king 8 here, I think they are too loose and aggressive. I will just stay back and hope for the best. And here I also hope for the best. The clear shove. Great that he folds. And I have to be really tight shoving into the big stack here. He can call pretty loose.
That's actually a good point, and that's something that I'm a bit unsure that would you have an option here to play the ace-3, and I'm thinking no, but that's just something that I think it's good to see what the range should be.
Maybe a suited ace-3.
A suited ace-3 I think would be a shove here, so but let's see what else there would be. And actually ace-3 off would be even, but suited ace-3 is an easy one. So I think there might be something that you are too risk averse near the bubble in these kind of situations. And I think this is the most important calling range, this Martin Cucci. And let's see that for ace-3 off, or ace-3 off and ace-3 suited, like how much your opponent would need to call that they would be unprofitable. And it would require about 17% and 21%. And if we are looking at what kind of range would that be, like the 20-something%, that's range is going to be pretty high to be calling on the bubble. This is going to be about the range that you shouldn't be shoving ace-3 suited anymore. But that's a good call that you said that ace-3 suited would be, I would be shoving ace-3 suited, and I would probably be shoving even the ace-3 off.
Here I'm really thinking about maybe just shoving here. But if he calls to lose, I'm not sure if it would be profitable, so I will just check.
In the bottom table, when you are having such a bigger stack than your opponent, it's going to be worse for him to be calling too wide. It was a bit of the other way around before, when you had the situation that your opponent had a larger stack. But I think now shoving king 8 suited would be good.
Okay. And play again hit or miss. And if he shoves here and we have nothing, we'll just fold. And sadly, this player here got a couple more chips, which sucks.
It shouldn't matter that much because he's still going to have a smaller stack, like 1/2 of your stack size, so it doesn't matter that much at this point. It sucks, of course, but it doesn't suck as much.
Okay. Now I'm thinking about if this would be a spot to 3-bet. Problem is that he's...
And on the top table, if you are even thinking about if this is a spot to 3-bet, you should be thinking about how big of a stack you have, how likely is it that your opponent would fold anything.
Yeah, that was stupid. I don't have any fold equity here. And I also think he's a bit too tight, so...
And I think that like the only thing you could think here would be that would this be a good spot for a stop and go? So that would be something that you could have enough fold equity on your opponent, but that's still pretty unlikely. And when there is, like, if this guy would have something like 2.5k stack here, and this guy would have also 2.5k stack, then a stop and go here would probably be really fine. And I think it would be way better than 3-bet shoving here without fold equity.
Okay.
So a stop and go is that you are going to call here and you are going to shove any flop because you are going to be the first to act, so he's going to face about like that's 2/3 of a bot size donk. And I think that people are folding a bit too much against those. And it's...
I can only do a stop and go when I'm out of position, right?
Yes.
Do it. Yeah, okay.
Because if you would do a stop and go like against Crazy G here, it might be that you are doing a stop and go and your opponent shoves on you. So then you just need to be really good in calling the opponent correctly.
Okay.
And that can be also be an art, and that can be also somewhere if you think your opponents are playing really good, like they're playing really good when they are shoving or folding, then that's one part that where you can find more edges even with the short stacked play.
Passive, and I'm not sure if his range is wide enough for that. I mean, this should be an any 2 spot for him. But he's maybe tighter, so I will fold here. And here now with Ace Queen I have to go all in, even if some of them would have raised. I fold against his raise here, and he accumulated a lot of chips with his stupid kamikaze poker, and I can't do much about it.
Every time your opponent is playing stupidly, you shouldn't be angry about it. Your thought process should be that it's unproductive to be angry about that your opponent plays stupidly. Your mind should be computing all the things that now I'm going to be, when my opponent plays stupid, it's going to be, how can I take advantage of that? And that's something that you need to think about, like against this player on this bottom table that has been really loose and aggressive. Then it's like how I can play or how I can take advantage of this player playing stupidly. Because playing stupidly implies already that the player is leaking equity, I think. So that's a thought process leak, I think.
But with Jack 2 suited, I have to shove and hope that he doesn't have a calling hand. And here I have to fold and hope that this player here busts out. This will be a close one. And luckily we are in the money. And here again, thinking about shoving over him. I think my ace should be good enough, and I remember from my coachings that this would be a good spot to shove.
This is something that I would prefer a smaller bet because of the stack depths that you are pretty deep against your opponent here. And also on the top part, it will be an interesting hand to Jack 8 suited when you are having clearly the shortest stack and you are having only four BBs.
I think I will shove and hope that he will not call. Okay.
I think on the bottom table, you have only started playing back at your opponent's limps when you are having a substack and you don't know what he does if you are raising it to 3x. And I think that you are scared a bit too much about playing against your opponent. When you are having position, you are having advantages over your opponent.
Okay.
Let's see on the top
And
table.
I'm also thinking about maybe shoving.
Let's see the Jack 9 suited also really quickly. Because I'm thinking that this is a hand that you probably should be calling three-handed. And we can see that if we are plotting range versus hand equities, and on you and the Jack 8 suited, it's just going to be like it's about 50%. But when we are thinking about this, that opponent is only risking half of his stack here, I'm thinking that I would be going all in with Jack 8 suited against all but the most needy players.
Okay.
But it's about 50% that you need with Jack 8 suited. So, and against the aggressive reg, you need to be calling a ton here. Like when we are looking at the Nash ranges in this spot, we can see that the Nash ranges are pretty wild.
Oh, okay. Or calling.
But I think that
was too slow.
it's. I think that it's good that you are calling less than Nash in here, but then it's a question of how much less than Nash do you want to be calling in general. And it's about adjusting to the players. And now you are making the bank or the cashier say ka-ching when you are having great hand and the cucho just shoves.
Us again, and I think with ace queen I have to call. It's not as much equity as I hoped for, but our hand holds up and we have a pretty good chance now to win this. And with 8-7 suited last chips, I have to shove here. I have to open up my shoving range.
In that kind of situations with 8-7 suited, especially if you are against multi-tabling regulars, you can also min-raise this and trying to find out a bit more fold equity against the opponents if they are, because then it's easier for them to mistake your stack size.
I think this 8-7 is the only hand I remember because it showed up as a shoving mistake in HRC. I think I have not enough fold equity to shove this here.
It might be, or it's just that you are going to be needing a lot of fold equity. And we can see that how harsh of a mistake it would be. It's actually worse than I thought. Let's go for a basic hand because this is an interesting why this is a mistake. It's not that bad. But it's when the crazy G should call 85%, and let's have this as well at this 8-7 suited. And we can see that against a random range you are a dog with 8-7 suited. Even though it's a durable hand, it requires for you to have fold equity. And if you have lost all your fold equity, then it's going to be a bit nasty, and we can see that how much fold equity you would need. And actually I think that this could be a good shove.
Really?
Even though Hold'em Resource says it, I think that opponents aren't going to be calling enough in here.
Okay.
So I don't think that even if Hold'em Resource says that this is a fold, especially against this guy that has folded way too much, I don't think this is bad.
Even though I don't have much fold equity left. 3-4 off. Here we max word. 3-4 off. I think it's the crappiest hand ever. So I will fold this.
That was pretty good to show the Nash pop-ups.
And I try to be aggressive here. I think he's not as much a maniac as the other guy. But I think I have to be a bit tighter than Nash here. 8, 7. I think this is a fold.
If it's a fold even against Nash, then if you're against a tight player, and it's going to be a fold.
Should be a shove for the 7 easily. You can have a look at it. Really good hand. I will just play this.
There's just 1 minute left.
More or less according to Nash. I will shove Nash and I will call pretty tight against him because I think he is maybe shoving not right enough. Sadly he has kings here.
But that's good because now we are going to have a more interesting heads up.
And at 10 effective, I think we can stay with shoving. I think because my hand here is total prep, I will try min raise and see how he reacts to min raises. Maybe it looks dangerous enough for him. Or he will just re-bet me and I have to fold.
I think that's good. I think that's good to play it. If you are not folding it, it's good to be not shoving it as well. I think that might be because the opponent had only 6 or 7 big blinds. I think it was quite optimistic to open, but I think you could also have limped it and then stabbed the flop, but it's not a huge hand anyway. I would probably, the standard play is to fold, but you also can limp. And I don't like min raise as much as folding or limping, but...
And with pocket 6s, this will go all in, no matter what. He limps and I will shove. And we have a coin flip. And our hand holds up, and we won this one.
And now we are through with the video, and we have been doing a bit longer session than we thought. So,
yeah.
And now that's it. That's all right. I just thought that the video is going to be shorter, but it had so many interesting points. And as we can see that, I think that we can see from this video that what will be the largest problem that you are having is going to be around the 14 to 20 big blinds. You are quite quickly going to a mode like, I can't do much here. And I think that in those situations there are a lot of edges to be had by playing aggressively. And that's something that I think that you should be exploring, like thinking about. I think that I'm probably one of the more aggressive guys on those stack depths, and I think that you should look at some of the coachings about attacking the weaker opponents quite relentlessly. I think the latest coaching on the 6-max games, I think in there was plenty of action on 888 poker, and they were against bad opponents, so directly applicable to micros on stars, and that's something that you need more aggression to. And then I think that your opening ranges in certain spots, like opening ranges from button when you are quite deep and opening ranges from UTG when you are deep, I think you can expand on those, and there is more edge to be had. but the greatest will be the around 14 to 20 BBs. And I think that also you should be looking at like the opponent that was in here. I don't remember the name. We can go a bit backwards. The Kucho07. I think that you should look at his hands, like what kind of hands this kind of player plays. Like what hands have you seen on him? And then think about like what hands will he call if you raise, and how he plays post flop. And I think that's something that if you are looking at some of the players that you are having problems against, you are looking at how they are playing, then you are utilizing your energy in a productive way into beating them in the future. And not just like this opponent plays stupidly. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm thinking about, that even though if the opponent is playing stupidly, there is something to be learned, because you can then learn how to best beat the guy by studying how he plays.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if you have any short questions, I think that we can take some, or you can ask them on your blog. And I think on the hands, I think hand analysis forum should be the better place to do.
Yeah, I post them, so it's no problem. Yeah. Short question.
And Shakal says that you should read Gus Hansen's Hand for Hand, Get in the Head of a Maniac. Yeah, I think the Kucho is going to be the guy that idolizes Gus Hansen. Like, probably is going to be losing as much money on the table as Gus Hansen, but playing aggressively and playing a lot of hands. But I think that there were a lot of good questions, and welcome Radeka and Chakal. It's always nice to see new people taking part in the chat. And this was something that I have never tried, this video coaching, that I have never tried about doing it as a public private coaching, and I think it was perhaps a bit too much on my computer, but I think that there is something that we could find out on Neo's game and how to improve some part of the game that you can't see from just hand histories, or you are required to have a lot of hand histories. But now when he had his thoughts while on game, it's a lot easier to think that is he thinking the situation correctly. And it was also nice to see that even in the beginning you could see that Neo had problems speaking about the hands. And the later we got on the video, even though we had less hands, we got more talk. So it gets easier. That's something that you can practice as well. Mm-hmm. About thinking and thought process and hands.
Okay.
Is there a question or?
I was wondering if I should table select in the macros. I mean, I have a couple of people marked as winning regulars. Should I play against them or should I avoid them?
I think that table selection is never a bad idea, but I don't think if you are having like any problems, I think that every $3.5 game is going to be a good game to play. But if you are selecting your games, you can get even better games. So you can get something like, I think you can get something like 1 or 2% of ROI, and I don't think that's that important in the micros, especially as there will be a lot of bad players on the table anyhow. Mm-hmm. But that's something that's good to learn.
Okay.
And yeah, as Kauri said, that tell your friends. The more users we have, the more content we can create, so you are going to benefit as well. And I'd say thanks on my part. Thanks to Neo. You had been a great guest again, and I think this video was better than I expected. And I'm always being told that the problem with Finns are that they are too humble and they are always underestimating themselves. And I think Neo is like a Finn in disguise in Germany, because I think that you are too humble in the way that you are not playing well, or you are not explaining a situation well, because I think that you are being too hard on yourself, and you are actually playing better on some spots than, and there are a lot of spots that there is like nothing to, even though you were unsure about it, you did a good option anyway, and I think that's really good for the future.
Okay. Thanks for the great coaching.
Yeah, and I think on next Sunday there will be some sit and go action again, or sit and goes or MTTs. I actually don't remember. But we are having next English coaching night on night on something on next Sunday. And on next Wednesday there is going to be Kyberi with pot limit Omaha. Then on the next week, on Monday there will be cash games with Zanfes on English. On Wednesday there will be pot limit Omaha with Kyberi, and on Sunday there will be some tournament poker with me. So there will be something even for the cash players. But now I think it's time to tell you good night if you are going to sleep, and if you are still playing poker, win a lot of money. But let's say bye bye and see you next time.